The city skyline blurred as Nathan Cole gripped the steering wheel of his midnight blue Range Rover, his mind clouded with a mix of exhaustion and frustration. Tonight was supposed to be about drowning his problems. His recent divorce had cost him half his fortune, and the bitterness sat heavy in his chest. He had spent the evening at a high-end bar in downtown Lagos, hoping that whiskey could wash away the sting of betrayal. But no amount of alcohol could erase the reality of what he had lost. As he turned onto the deserted road leading to his gated mansion, his thoughts were interrupted by a sudden figure darting into the street. "What the hell?" Nathan slammed his foot on the brakes, tires screeching against the asphalt as his car jerked to a halt. His heart pounded as he stared through the windshield, adrenaline sobering him up in an instant. A young woman stood frozen in the glare of his headlights, her breath ragged, eyes wide with terror. She looked disheveled, her once elegant gown now tattered and covered in dust, her long dark hair falling in tangled waves around her face. Before Nathan could even register what was happening, a black SUV sped past, its engine roaring as it vanished down the street. The woman's head snapped toward it, her entire body trembling. She turned back to Nathan, desperation in her eyes. "Please, help me. Forced marriage," she whispered, barely able to stand. Nathan cursed under his breath. This was exactly the kind of situation he wanted to avoid. A stranger, a woman in distress, trouble. But before he could even think of brushing her off, the woman's knees buckled. She collapsed right in front of his car. "Shit," Nathan muttered. He stepped out, his expensive loafers crunching against the pavement as he approached her. Up close, she looked even worse. Bruises on her arms, dirt smeared on her face, and sheer exhaustion in her eyes. This wasn't just some drunken mess. This woman was running from something, or someone. Nathan glanced at the empty road. He exhaled sharply. "Get in the car." The woman blinked up at him, shocked. "What?" "You heard me. Get in before I change my mind," Nathan said impatiently, looking over his shoulder. Without hesitation, she struggled to her feet, gripping the edge of the car door for support. The moment she was inside, Nathan slid behind the wheel and sped toward his mansion, his jaw tight. What the hell had he just gotten himself into? Nathan pulled into his private driveway, the security lights casting a golden glow on his modern mansion. As he killed the engine, the woman in the passenger seat let out a shaky breath, looking around nervously. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his messy dark hair. "Before you say anything, who the hell are you, and why were those guys after you?" The woman hesitated. "My name is Isabelle Okafor." Her voice was soft, but carried a weight of urgency. "And I was supposed to be married today." Nathan scoffed. "So you ditched your wedding and ended up running into my car? That's some movie-level drama." Isabelle flinched. "I didn't run away because of cold feet," she murmured. "I was being forced." Nathan frowned, crossing his arms. "Forced?" She swallowed, her fingers tightening around the hem of her dress. "My father, he made a deal. He promised me to Chief Ibuka, a man twice my age. In exchange, my father gets a political position in the next election." She let out a bitter laugh. "I was never a daughter to him, just a bargaining chip." Nathan leaned back, processing her words. A forced marriage for power and status. He could almost feel the bitter taste of irony. He had just lost half of everything he worked for in a failed marriage, and here she was, fighting to escape a marriage before it even started. Still, this was not his problem. "You could have gone anywhere," he muttered. "Why the hell did you run in front of my car?" "I didn't plan this," Isabelle said quickly. "I was hiding in an abandoned shop near the highway. Then those men, Chief Ibuka's guards, found me. I panicked. I ran. I didn't even know where I was going." Nathan exhaled heavily, rubbing his temple. "Great. So now I have a runaway bride hiding in my house, and a powerful, corrupt politician looking for her. Isabelle's lips quivered. I know you have no reason to help me, but I swear to God if they take me back, my life is over. Please, just let me stay the night. Just until I figure out what to do. Nathan closed his eyes for a moment, contemplating. This was exactly the kind of mess he didn't need. But looking at her, a terrified woman who had risked everything to escape, he knew he couldn't just throw her out. Fine, he muttered, standing up. You can stay. Isabelle let out a breath of relief. Thank you. But, he added firmly, this doesn't mean I'm your knight in shining armor. You stay here, you don't cause problems, and if anyone comes looking for you, you're on your own. She nodded quickly. Understood. Nathan turned to leave, but hesitated at the doorway. Something told him his life had just taken a sharp, unexpected turn, and he wasn't sure he liked it. The living room was quiet as Isabelle clutched the warm cup of tea Nathan had given her. The mansion felt surreal, modern, cold, and far too luxurious for someone like her. Nathan sat across from her, watching her with sharp eyes. You still haven't told me what your plan is, she hesitated. I don't have one. Nathan sighed. That's not exactly comforting. Isabelle bit her lip. She had one idea, but it was crazy, reckless, desperate, and Nathan was the only one who could help her. Taking a deep breath, she set the cup down and looked him in the eye. I need you to take my virginity. Nathan choked on his whiskey, coughing violently. You need me to what? If I'm not a virgin, Chief Ibuka won't want me, she whispered. It's the only way I can be free. Nathan rubbed his face, laughing bitterly. You've got to be kidding me. You want me, a complete stranger, to sleep with you just to make your creepy fiancé lose interest? Isabelle swallowed hard. Yes. Nathan's expression darkened. I think you're underestimating how twisted these men are. Even if you weren't pure, they could still force you into it. Tears welled in Isabelle's eyes. I don't know what else to do. Nathan studied her, then shook his head. I don't take advantage of desperate women. She looked away, her shoulders slumping. But, Nathan said after a pause, you can stay here until we figure something else out. Isabelle blinked. You'd do that? Nathan exhaled. Looks like I don't have much of a choice, do I? His lips curled into a smirk. But let's be clear, this is temporary. A flicker of hope flashed in Isabelle's eyes. Maybe, just maybe, she had found an escape after all. Nathan exhaled, rubbing his aching temples. The night had been long, and he could feel a headache creeping in. He needed sleep, not drama. Isabelle sat on the couch, curled up like a child, her body still trembling slightly. Come on, Nathan muttered, standing up. You can take the guest room. She blinked, startled. You're letting me stay? He rolled his eyes. Would you rather sleep outside? She quickly shook her head. Nathan led her down the hallway, stopping in front of a large door. Here. He pushed it open, revealing a spacious but simple bedroom. Isabelle stepped in cautiously, her eyes scanning the soft white bed, the warm bedside lamp, and the large window overlooking the dark city. This is too much, she murmured. Just take it, Nathan muttered, already tired of the conversation. He turned toward his room but paused. Here. He grabbed a big t-shirt from the nearby closet and tossed it to her. You should change into something comfortable. Isabelle caught it, her fingers gripping the soft fabric. Thank you. Nathan didn't respond. He just walked away and shut his door. Nathan leaned against the kitchen counter, pinching the bridge of his nose. The headache was getting worse. He poured himself a glass of water, then paused. His gaze flickered toward the guest room door. Has she eaten? With a low sigh, he grabbed some bread, eggs, and tomatoes. It wasn't a 5-star meal, but it was something. 15 minutes later, he knocked on her door. Isabelle. The door creaked open, and she peeked out. She had changed into his oversized t-shirt, and the sight of it made something shift in his chest. It hung loosely on her small frame, reaching her mid-thigh. He cleared his throat and handed her the plate. "You look like you need food," he said simply. She stared at the meal, her eyes misty. "No one has cooked for me before." Nathan raised a brow. "Really? My father doesn't care," she whispered. "And my mother—" She trailed off. Nathan didn't push. "Eat and get some rest." She took the plate and whispered, "Thank you." He didn't respond. He just walked away. Nathan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind clouded with exhaustion. The room was quiet, save for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Just as his body began to relax, a soft creak of the door caught his attention. He turned his head, his heart slowing, then speeding up. Isabelle stood at the doorway, her small frame barely visible in the dim glow of the bedside lamp. She hesitated, gripping the fabric of his oversized t-shirt, the one he had given her. Nathan exhaled, rubbing his face. "Isabelle, what are you doing?" She didn't move, didn't speak for a moment. Then, in a voice so small it barely reached him, she whispered, "I can't sleep." He sat up slightly, watching her. The fear in her eyes was still there, deep, haunting. "Do you need something?" he asked, though he already knew what. Isabelle swallowed hard. She glanced away, embarrassed. "I know this is stupid, but I don't want to be alone." Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. This was a bad idea. But when he looked at her again, standing there, lost, trembling, he couldn't say no. He lifted the blanket slightly, an unspoken invitation. Isabelle hesitated for only a second before stepping forward. Slowly, cautiously, she crawled onto the bed, her movements hesitant, like she was afraid he'd change his mind. Nathan lay back, his muscles tense as she curled up beside him, her small hands gripping the edge of his shirt. She was warm, softer than he expected. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she exhaled, her body relaxing into his. Nathan hesitated before resting his chin lightly on top of her head. "You're safe," he murmured. Isabelle closed her eyes, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For the first time in a long while, she believed it. She lay against him, fingers brushing lightly against the fabric of his shirt. His warmth surrounded her, his scent, a mix of faded cologne and something uniquely him, filled her senses. For weeks, she had been running. Tonight, she finally felt still. Nathan let out a deep breath, his arms loosely wrapping around her. "You're shaking," he muttered. Isabelle nodded against him. "I've never been this close to a man before." Nathan tensed slightly, but then he forced himself to relax. "I told you," he said softly. "I won't take advantage of you." Silence stretched between them. Then she lifted her head, her eyes locking onto his. "What if I want you to?" she whispered. Nathan's dark eyes flickered with something unreadable. He studied her, his thumb unconsciously brushing against her arm. "You don't mean that," he said quietly. Isabelle swallowed. "I do." Nathan let out a low, humorless chuckle, though his grip on her tightened slightly. "Isabelle," he muttered, his voice rough, strained. "You're scared. You're vulnerable. You don't want me. You just want an escape." She shook her head, her fingers clutching his shirt tighter. "Number, I want to feel something different. Something real." Nathan inhaled sharply as she placed a hesitant hand on his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Isabelle," he warned, his voice thick with emotion. She moved closer, her breath warm against his skin. Their faces were inches apart now. She could see it in his eyes. The battle, the struggle between what was right and what he desired. "I trust you," she whispered. Nathan's jaw tightened, his breath uneven. He didn't know whether to push her away or pull her closer. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure which choice was the right one. Isabelle stirred as the first light of dawn crept through the luxurious guest room window. The air was thick with silence, except for the distant hum of Lagos waking up beyond the mansion's high gates. She sat up, the oversized t-shirt Nathan had given her slipping off one shoulder. Last night had felt like a dream. Nathan's unexpected kindness, the warmth of his arms when she had been too afraid to sleep alone. But this wasn't a fairy tale, and she didn't have the luxury of waiting for a night to save her. Chief Ibuka would come looking. And if she was still untouched, still pure, they would drag her back. She couldn't risk it. Quietly, Isabelle slid out of bed and tiptoed toward the door, her heart hammering. She had no idea where she would go. A bar? A cheap hotel? Find someone willing to help her lose what men like Ibuka valued most? The thought made her sick, but what other choice did she have? She swallowed the lump in her throat and turned the doorknob. The door barely creaked open before a firm, muscular arm shot past her, slamming it shut. She gasped, spinning around. Nathan. His tall frame loomed over her, shirtless, his dark eyes burning with something dangerous. His hair was still tousled from sleep, his jaw set in a firm line. "Where do you think you're going?" His voice was low, rough, laced with something she couldn't quite place. Isabelle's breath hitched. I need to go." Nathan's grip tightened on the door, blocking her exit. To do what? Throw yourself at some random guy? His voice was sharper now, his anger barely restrained. Her eyes flashed. "What choice do I have, Nathan? I need to be free. If I'm not a virgin, Chief Ibuka won't want me. That's my only way out." Nathan's jaw tensed, his fingers flexing at his sides. "And that's your plan? To let some stranger—" He exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. "Jesus, Isabelle!" She crossed her arms, her chin lifting defiantly. "You refuse to help me, so I'll do it myself." Nathan's eyes darkened, his expression unreadable. The muscles in his arms twitched, as if he were holding himself back. Then, in one swift movement, he stepped closer, his body caging her against the door. "You don't get to do this to yourself," he murmured, his voice low and dangerous. "Not like this." Isabelle's breath caught as his warmth surrounded her, his scent, a mix of faded cologne and something uniquely him, wrapping around her like a trap. Her voice wavered. "Why do you care, Nathan? Why does it matter to you what I do with my body?" His hands came up, framing her face with a gentleness that contrasted his intense stare. "Because you're not some pawn in a power game," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're not a damn bargaining chip, and I won't let you do this to yourself just to escape." She swallowed hard, her body betraying her as a tremor ran through her. "Then what am I supposed to do?" she whispered. Nathan exhaled heavily, his thumb brushing against her cheek. "You wait." She blinked. "What?" His gaze flickered to her lips, then back to her eyes. "You don't give yourself away like that. Not to me, not to anyone. Not until you're ready." His voice softened, his control slipping just a little. "You deserve more than desperation, Isabelle." The words sent a shiver down her spine. The air between them felt charged, electric. Nathan tilted his head slightly, his face so close that his breath brushed against her skin. His fingers slid down to her neck, barely touching, his warmth spreading through her. Isabelle's lips parted as she lifted her gaze to his. "And what if I want you to?" she whispered. Nathan's throat bobbed, his fingers tensed against her skin. The room felt too small, the space between them non-existent. His gaze darkened, his control hanging by a thread. "Don't tempt me, Isabelle," he muttered. She reached up, resting her trembling hand on his chest. His heartbeat was wild beneath her palm, matching her own. "I trust you," she murmured. Nathan's breathing turned uneven. His fingers brushed the curve of her jaw, trailing down her neck, leaving a path of heat in their wake. For a moment she thought he would finally kiss her, but instead he let out a low, shaky breath and whispered, "We wait. Until you're ready." The words crashed over her like a wave, unexpected, but so deeply grounding. Nathan was different. He wasn't like the men who only saw her as a prize, a possession. He was giving her control. Bang! The loud noise shattered the moment, making both of them jump. Nathan's body went rigid, his eyes snapping toward the window. Another crash, glass breaking. "Stay here." His voice was sharp now, commanding. But Isabelle was already shaking her head. "Nathan, what's happening?" He didn't answer. He grabbed a gun from the drawer near his bedside and turned toward the hallway. Isabelle's blood ran cold. "You have a gun?" Nathan shot her a look. "Lagos isn't exactly the safest place." A third bang echoed through the house, and this time it was followed by voices outside. Nathan's expression darkened. They had found her. Isabelle's breath hitched as fear clutched her chest. "It's them." Nathan's grip tightened on the gun, his jaw clenching. "Stay behind me." A shadow moved past the window. The air grew thick with tension. To be continued.